Alright everyone, so here goes the installation for your low pressure fuel pump in your INFINITI Q50 or Q60. Currently I'm going to be using a Walboro 485 pump, model number. Mine is a 267, most of you guys are using 274s, but the only difference is the relief pressure, 87 psi versus 112. The 267 should be fine, should work no issue. Now the one thing that I did get is the Walboro installation kit. It includes the Walboro sock and a few other things that might be a good idea to get prior to the installation. I just have some clamps here that I'm going to be using for the install, for the bottom part, and some safety wire that I have. So other than that, let's get this assembly going and then begin the installation. What I have here is actually the exact same fuel pump that you will find in any of your Q50s and Q60s, but I actually went ahead and got a spare pump because I do not want to use my actual stock pump for this, considering I may even make a mistake during this installation, and I don't want to have to live with that with only having one pump. So it's always a good idea to get a spare. Now the price varies online, but they're kind of rare to find at a decent price, so just be aware of that. And also I will link all the part numbers to everything that I'll be using today in the description for you guys to use in the future. Now keep in mind, this fuel pump is very fragile. There's a lot of plastics going on here, very cheap plastics. So first things first, this tab comes apart right there. We're going to take that off first, and then we're going to remove this second tab here, except this one doesn't have one that comes off. And there's 3 tabs around the entire fuel pump assembly, which separate the bottom from the top altogether. Now I actually went ahead and labeled which side the yellow wires go in and which side the blue and black wires go into. So when I'm putting this back together, I know exactly where it goes and there's no confusion. Now we're going to go ahead and take this tab off. Everyone seems to have an issue taking these off, but hopefully it's not too bad. Oh boy, little freaking cheap tab, to be honest with you. And there it goes. Should be a little piece. Hopefully you guys don't break this tab. It's very important that you don't. Alright, so next up we're going to go ahead and remove these 3 tabs around. The third one is right here. Now that all 3 are gone, we just have this clip there to take off, and I believe we can just release that, bring it up, and then pull up at the same time. So that whole assembly should come up unless any of the tabs re-engaged. So there are the springs, and the top part is detached. Alright, next up we have to take off the fuel pressure relief line, which is this line down here. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. Oh, that was pretty easy. And just be careful with this line not to damage it or anything like that. So fuel pressure relief line is removed, and now we're going to move on to the actual temperature sensor on the bottom. To take off this sensor, we're just going to pry it out. I don't want to break this, so it's kind of a pain in the ass to do. There it goes. But that should be good right there. Oh, it does come around. There's a clip back there that releases the wires, and there it goes. Next step, we're gonna go ahead and disconnect all of these harnesses from here. And they seem really flimsy, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this. There we go. That one's off. Man, this stuff is so flimsy. I'm scared to break it. There's another one. Let's do the last one. There it goes. Now that everything's disconnected, this should just come apart, as long as the tabs are not secured. And there it goes. Now once this comes out, I went ahead and removed the wire directly from the fuel pump, because we're actually going to take the fuel pump from the bottom, and the sock's going to come with it. There's 3 tabs holding in the fuel sock, filter to the fuel pump, and the assembly all together, so just make sure not to break these tabs off. They're really flimsy. There's 3 of them. Once you release 2, it should come off fairly easy. There's a sock and the bottom section. Now make sure not to lose this. Depending on how you're installing this, whether you're using the bottom section or you're using the method that I'm going to use, you may still have use for this part. At this point, the pump itself should slide out. Now it's probably in there a little bit, but you might be able to give it a little push from the top. And there's our little guy. This is kind of laughable. This is the stock fuel pump in our car in the low pressure side. So make sure to keep this little spacer here. You don't want to lose that. We're going to reuse that actually. But there it is, guys. There's a little fuel pump. Very important, guys. Make sure you guys get the O-ring that might get stuck inside of the assembly. You're definitely going to need that O-ring in further steps. Now, just briefly taking a look here at our Walboro 485 model 267 pump. We are going to be modifying this pump, and I'll show you guys a picture of what it's supposed to look like here. And yeah, we're going to be modifying this pump here. We're going to be cutting it down quite a bit in order for us to be able to fit it into our stock assembly. But for starters, since we're not going to use this cable here at all, harness wire here, we're pretty much going to cut this off. I'm going to leave quite a bit of slack, but go ahead and cut these off. You're not going to need them. So let's go ahead and cut these. There we go. For this next section, where I'm actually going to notch off the top part of this part of the fuel pump. So I'm going to do this off camera, and when I get back to you guys, it'll be notched off, and I'll have a picture as well included so you guys can actually do this yourselves. Now here's where you want to notch off the actual fuel pump so that you can put the OM spacer back on and the actual O-ring that came on the stock assembly. Alright, so now we're going to prepare our fuel pump holder section to be able to retain the bigger pump in place. And we're going to do that by simply drilling tiny little holes to fit wire through to be able to retain the bottom portion of the fuel pump. So let's go ahead and drill these holes. Be very careful not to overdo it. It just requires a tiny little hole. And we're through. I'm going to repeat that process 2 more times and we should be good. Now I'm going to start test fitting the pump, make sure everything is good. So I'm going to loop the wires in through the existing hole on the assembly and make sure you line up the O-ring space with the correct area inside the fuel pump, and then the O-ring actually goes inside. There you go. You should hear kind of a small click when it's in there, and it won't go up any further. So the way we're going to secure the actual fuel pump to the assembly is by securing a clamp on the bottom part of the pump and using the wiring, the security wire that we're going to be using on the clamp from those holes that we created to secure it against the assembly. So that is the reason for those holes, and we're also going to make one connection across to kind of secure it in place on the clamp. Alright, so at this point we've gotten the fuel pump secure to the actual fuel pump assembly. We use the clamp. Those 3 little holes that we drilled, we use the safety wire, and we also use a clamp at the bottom. The factory harness is going to have to be cut in order to mate it to the actual fuel pump. So remove the harness that goes into the stock fuel pump, cut it up, and then actually just use the butt connectors that's supplied in the kit. I'll be supplying a link to this as well, or you can use any butt connector, doesn't matter. And we're going to hook it up to the Walboro fuel pump. Quick note, blue is the live wire, black is ground, just in case you guys were wondering. For this next step, we're going to be adding the Walboro sock to the bottom of the fuel pump, and that's going to go just like that. It should click in, but there's actually a clip. Alright, so the Walboro sock is in. You can remove the clip and then put the sock on and put the clip on, but I just pushed it in and it seemed to work just fine. I'm going to begin the process of putting everything back together into the fuel pump assembly. Alright, so we have our fuel pump assembly back inside the basket, and I'm just going to put everything back together, and we should be finished. Alright, so let's put the springs back in. Let's do one at a time so they don't fall. That side's in. There we go. Alright, so that goes back on there. And now I'm looking for the sensor that we disconnected in the earlier step. That goes right back here. That's back in there. Make sure you put it back in the groove in this little spot where it belonged. And you can proceed to connecting it in the yellow slot. Alright, so this right about wraps up the install. Make sure you don't damage any of these lines, and plug everything back the way you found it. And like I said, that's why I marked the connections yellow and black initially, so that I knew where to put them back in. But other than that, the install is complete. I actually just have a couple things to tidy up, but nothing is out of place here. This is not going to sit the same way that you found it, so these clips are actually going to sit a little bit above where they actually used to clip at before. And yeah, we're pretty much done here, and this is the completion of our low pressure fuel pump to run E85. If you guys found this video somewhat useful, go ahead and give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe, and once again, thank you for watching.